welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute most famous psychological concepts of our time, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. But, we aren't just going to recap what you probably already know. We're actually going to uncover a pretty shocking scientific mystery hiding right beneath the surface. Is this famous effect a profound insight into the human mind? Or is it literally just a statistical illusion?
I mean, we've all seen it, right? People confidently claiming to be absolute experts when they clearly have zero idea what they're talking about. It's a phenomenon that's perfectly captured by psychologist David Dunning himself. Basically, the first rule of the club is that you have absolutely no idea you're actually in the club. Okay, before we go any further, let's bust a major internet myth. The Dunning-Kruger effect is absolutely not some claim that people with low general intelligence are, quote, too stupid to know they're stupid. The scientific reality is actually much, much narrower. It's strictly about specific skill deficits. It simply means that people who are unskilled at one particular specific task tend to overestimate their competence in that one single area. So, let's get into the famous psychological effect itself. This whole theory originally came to light back in 1999 through the groundbreaking work of psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger. They tested a bunch of undergrad students in areas like logic, grammar, and humor, and the results were wild. Students who objectively scored way down in the bottom quartile, specifically the 12th percentile, shockingly believed they were actually performing way above average, placing themselves all the way up in the 62nd percentile.
Which brings us to what they called the dual burden of incompetence.
To explain this massive, honestly kind of comical gap between objective reality and self-perception, Dunning and Kruger proposed a really fascinating metacognitive theory. They called it the dual burden account. Basically, it means that if you're terrible at grammar, you suffer from two distinct burdens. First, obviously, you lack the actual skill of grammar. But second, because you don't know the rules, you entirely lack the expertise required to realize that your grammar is bad in the first place. You literally just don't have the tools to evaluate your own failure.
Now, what's really super interesting is that the 1999 study also highlighted a reverse effect. The top performers, the ones absolutely acing the tests, actually underestimated their relative abilities. Why? Well, because of a false consensus. They found the test so incredibly easy that they wrongly assumed everyone else must have found it just as easy, which caused them to rank themselves lower compared to their peers. So, the psychological explanation feels incredibly satisfying, doesn't it? It perfectly explains that annoying coworker or, your average internet troll. But take a quick second to assess your own skills right now, because we're about to drop a massive plot twist that has fiercely divided the scientific community for 2 decades now. Ready? What if the entire effect is just a statistical illusion?
Let's unpack this statistical plot twist.
Fast forward a few years to 2002. A group of researchers began to look past the human mind and focus strictly on the numbers, pointing heavily to a statistical concept called regression to the mean. This is basically a phenomenon where extreme measurements tend to move closer to the average on related measurements. Because no one's self-assessment perfectly correlates with their actual score, well, if you select someone with an extremely low actual test score, mathematically speaking, their self-assessed score really has nowhere to go but up toward the average.
Now, the really crucial point is what happens when you combine that regression to the mean with another extremely well-documented bias, the better-than-average effect. As humans, we naturally just tend to rate ourselves a little bit better than average across the board. Like, if the average IQ is 100, most people naturally assume theirs is, say, 115. When you combine this baseline human optimism with statistical regression to the mean, you get a highly potent mathematical cocktail.
So it becomes a battle of math versus mind. To really wrap our heads around this, let's walk through an incredibly fascinating thought experiment from the research to see how this statistical illusion works using absolutely zero human psychology. Okay, imagine a class takes a 100-item true or false test, but they guess completely randomly. Pure, dumb luck. By chance, some are going to score an abysmal 10%, and some will score an amazing 90%. Now, if you ask them to take a second completely random test, what happens? Those extreme 10% scores will naturally improve toward the 50% average, while the top scores will mathematically fall toward that same 50% average. The extremes just vanish.
And guys, here is where it gets totally wild. In 2002, researchers literally ran computer simulations using purely random data. No humans, no metacognition, absolutely zero egos involved. Just random variables mapped against each other. And guess what? The simulated bottom quartile overestimated their performance and the top quartile underestimated it. The computer generated the exact same Dunning-Kruger graph based on literally nothing but statistical noise.
Now, of course, David Dunning has fiercely defended his psychological theory against this mathematical critique. He argues that even if statistical noise like regression to the mean is present, you can't just dismiss the effect. He says that stating it's just a regression effect is merely relabeling the problem, rather than actually explaining it. Because at the end of the day, that profound disconnect between a person's perception and their reality still demands a psychological explanation.
Which brings us to why all of this still matters.
So, playing the neutral arbiter here for a second, does it actually matter if this famous effect is caused by a profound lack of metacognition, or if it's just a statistical baseline driven by random noise and general human optimism? Well, the short answer is yes, it absolutely matters. The discrepancies between actual and estimated performance are completely real, regardless of the underlying cause. The phenomenon of unskilled people misjudging their abilities isn't fake at all. We just might be debating the engine that's actually driving it.
And this matters immensely in high-stakes fields where overestimation can literally lead to disaster. Just think about these real-world examples. In aviation, an overconfident pilot might attempt a weather maneuver far beyond their actual training. Or in medicine, a trainee might misjudge their ability to perform a really complex procedure without supervision. Even in economics, buyers constantly overpay for flawed goods because they confidently ignore risks that they just don't understand.
So whether it's a double curse of the mind or a mathematical certainty of the numbers, the danger of overconfidence is a reality that we all have to navigate. Which leaves us with one final, honestly deeply unsettling question to ponder the next time you feel absolutely certain about your own competence. Are you genuinely skilled, or just statistically bound to think you are? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.